Welcome back to Hanna Wonders. Thank you so much for sticking around on this roller coaster ride through all things theater. I'm really excited about this week's episode because, like many of you, this show truly changed what was possible for musical theater. So today, we're tackling Jason Robert Brown's The Last 5 Years. I found this show when I was, I think, a freshman in college, and though it had been around since 2002, I wasn't exposed to the show until a fellow theater nerd, who also requested this pod, found out that I hadn't listened to the original cast recording. I will never forget the shock and the sadness of hearing the character Jamie sing the song Nobody Needs to Know for the first time. And part of the genius of this show is how Brown took a love story and turned it on its head, not just by the extraordinary way it weaves its tale, but also the contemporary take on marital struggles, and especially that in the life of artists. Jason Robert Brown was born in 1970 in the suburbs of New York City. He came from a Jewish family and community, which comes through a lot in many of his projects musically. And growing up, he attributed his desire to want to write and perform in the musical theater community to Stephen Sondheim. Specifically, he was inspired by Sweeney Todd and Sunday in the Park with George. Brown became a jack of many trades throughout his career, working as an arranger, a conductor, a book writer, lyricist, and pianist. And he started this journey working on side projects such as William Finn's A New Brain. He's always been a part of what I consider the off-Broadway crowd, doing new and complex pieces that didn't necessarily fill houses for long-term runs, but he crafted cast recordings that are so loved to this day, especially among the theater community. And for me, Jason Robert Brown, he had a solo album called Songs from an Unmade Bed. He has just an amazing way with telling stories about people that are very real within each individual song. His first big break into the off-Broadway world was his hit, Songs for a New World. And this show is difficult to categorize and explain since it straddles the musical and song cycle world. So there isn't really one specific plot line, but instead several stories locked together under one theme. And the theme that he chose is the moment of decision. I really enjoy the fact that the songs in this show are so original and they vary in the musical quality that they use and the genres that they touch on. He worked on this show with direction by Daisy Prince, who is daughter of famed Broadway director Hal Prince. And this show ended up landing him a larger gig writing the score to the musical Parade. So after he worked with Daisy, her dad, Hal Prince, was working on this show and had asked Stephen Sondheim to come in as the writer. And Sondheim had turned it down for a different project, but when Brown took it over, they were very successful. Parade ended up taking home the 1999 Tony Awards for Best Book of a Musical and Best Original Score. And Brown himself also walked away with a Drama Desk Award for Outstanding Music. And we will see this throughout several of his shows that this is where he really shines. There's some critique that his book writing skills are more minimal. I tend to disagree with that because I feel that his lyrics tell the story for themselves. And I think that's even more difficult and requires a higher level of artistry. But following Parade, Brown teamed up with Daisy Prince again for his third show, which is what we're here to talk about today, which is The Last 5 Years. What I didn't realize when I started this is how personal this show was to Brown. It actually is based on his first failed marriage. And the show was so close to the story of their relationship and their struggles that there was actually legal action taken by his ex-wife. And prior to opening night, he did have to go through and change some of the songs and the content. It definitely came across as, the character of Kathy could be seen really negatively, and his ex did not appreciate that. So he did change some of the content before it premiered at Chicago's Northlight Theater in 2001. So when it opened with Norbert Leo Butz. Yes, that's his name. And he opened as Jamie, and Lauren Kennedy starred as Kathy. When the show moved to off-Broadway in 2002, my absolute favorite lady, Miss Sherry Renee Scott, took over as Kathy since Lauren Kennedy already had a previous engagement. And so that's why we ended up with Scott as our Kathy on the original cast recording as well. So those two ended up on the OCR, and the show won the 2002 Drama Desk Award for, you guessed it, Outstanding Music and Lyrics, as well as getting a nomination for Outstanding Musical. I'm not mentally prepared to discuss the movie yet, so instead I'm just going to jump into some of the brilliance behind how the plot works in this show, because I much prefer to discuss that than Anna Kendrick's performance. As I said before, the general idea is that we're watching a 5-year relationship between Jamie, who's an aspiring writer, and Kathy, who is an aspiring actress. And there are two amazing tweaks that make this show so original. And the first is that in this 2-person cast, the two characters only interact with each other on stage once. They interact at the midpoint of the show during the wedding scene when they exchange vows, but otherwise they don't directly interact with each other. The second twist to the storytelling is we are experiencing their relationship from opposing timelines. So Kathy starts us off with a heartbreaking ballad titled I'm Still Hurting, in which we learn that Jamie has left her and their marriage behind. Then immediately following this song, Jamie comes in with Shik's a Goddess, which depicts the first time he meets and speaks with Kathy. In other words, Kathy tells us the story of their relationship from the end to the beginning, and Jamie tells it from beginning to end. So while this tool allows us to think we know how things are going to turn out, there are still several emotional surprises, including the song I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, which is Nobody Needs to Know. Each song alternates characters, moving quickly through snapshots of their relationship. To me, this compounds the emotional impact of the finale when we have just seen Jamie's extramarital affair and then come to Kathy singing after she had an amazing first date and first kiss with Jamie in the heartbreaking number Goodbye Until Tomorrow, which is combined with I Could Never Rescue You. So the two songs collide and we hear Jamie saying goodbye for the last time as he's leaving her, and she is singing about the hope she has for the relationship, the life that she's looking forward to together. And it's just completely heartbreaking. It gets me every time. But the melody is stunning. The way that Brown has woven these two numbers together and these two characters together in this final scene is really magic. It also has one of the best lines of the show when Kathy says, I open myself one stitch at a time. And this is very reminiscent to what we expect of Sondheim, which is really great, playful language. The characters are so descriptive in the way that they talk to each other, and it is so poetic from start to finish. Throughout this bizarrely relatable show, we see Jamie gaining success as an author and watch as he struggles to ride that wave because Kathy has hit a dead end in her own career and starts to become unsupportive. Therefore, you start to get the sense that they are not supporting each other from the moment he begins to get traction in his own job. And the amazing thing about Brown's storytelling is both characters, while you want to hate them, are too relatable and real to despise. Kathy's need for support, her frustration in her failed career, her struggle to hang on to Jamie while feeling he's drifting away is all visually represented through the consistent ignorance of each other's presence on stage. We're watching two people failing to communicate while they think they're doing their best. And this was shocking. I saw the first production of this. My first opportunity to see this was in Tucson, Arizona. It was a smaller theater company, and the stage was stripped down. It was a black box that I was watching in. A small band. It was about a 4-piece band. The two actors were unbelievable. I had never really experienced a musical in such a setting where it was that stripped down. I kind of came to my musical knowledge through bigger spectacle shows, things that were more popular in the golden age of Broadway. And what you really see is that the music in this show carries everything along. And it requires a special type of actor to be able to tell each song's story, because you're just looking at a snapshot. So while we're looking at, for instance, Jamie and Shiksa, where he's talking about falling in love with Kathy, we're really getting this tale from him about the first time he sees her and bells are going off, and how he feels, and he's very young and he's excited. And then when we're jumping to the next piece, it continues to transform. So the character development is outrageous, and because it's in such huge chunks, the requirement of these actors to be melded in, for lack of a better term, to the emotional journey these two are going on it's just fantastic. It's really transformative theater to me, because it doesn't have the flash. It doesn't rely on fancy costumes or fancy sets. You know, you could watch this as a cabaret style and get the same effect. So when we're looking at the specifics of the music that Brown created for this show, its brilliance is really unlike any other. Now, that's not to say that he wasn't obviously inspired by Sondheim. He really took creative lyrics to a different place in the last 5 years, starting with Still Hurting, which is the opening number. Since Brown is introducing us to Kathy at the end of their relationship, this piece is especially important. And I love this style of writing when the author essentially tells you what's going to happen at the end, but still has the complexity in the script to keep you enticed to find out why. And I think that's really difficult to surprise your audience that way. It's definitely a motif that we've seen in theater across the board, but that in particular in this show, because of the way the story is told, shifting from Still Hurting, which is, you know, beginning with a piano and violin, it's a slow and emotional waltz, having that story being told of someone. You know, I mean, I've had my fair share of emotional breakups, and the lyrics in this number just kill me. Specifically, Jamie is sure something wonderful died. Jamie decides it's his right to decide. Jamie's got secrets he doesn't confide, and I'm still hurting. I mean, the way that he captures what it feels like to watch someone leave your life for the last time, I feel speechless when I talk about that. And it's even more impressive in contrast to where we jump to in the second song with Shiksa, because then we're having this abrupt change. It's very upbeat. And because this story is more close to home for Brown, it tells a story about being from the Jewish community and the thrill he had of falling in love with someone outside of his religious background, which would be much to the chagrin of his mother and his grandmother, which he talks about, but is very exciting for him because it's outside of his community. It's kind of rebellious. And he, you know, kind of makes a joke of all of the different names of women that he's dated who come from the Jewish community, and how he's very excited to be with someone who is so different and isn't necessarily approved by his family. And I think that's really relatable as well. You know, we always want to date the rebel, or the joke of teenage girls wanting to date somebody their parents hate, right? I just think that from every step and every angle of this show from the very beginning, he's touching on things that, even though you're like, that's kind of a shithead thing to do, you know what he's talking about. We've been there. We've all had friends or been like that ourselves, where we want to rebel, and it's exciting and it's new. And he really brings that to life in Shiksa Goddess. Okay, so I could continue to go through the entire show and its lyrical genius, because I truly find this show to just be poetry from start to finish. But please just go check out the OCR for the last 5 years, Sherry Renee Scott, Norbert Leah Butz, and sit down and, you know, I always recommend reading the lyrics as you listen, just so you can catch all the little bits and pieces. But I'm really not blowing this out of proportion. This show is one that musical theater majors and master students use for their thesis. It is so complex and thoughtful in its musicality, that I found so many different master theses about comparing the dramaturgy and the music stylings and where he could have pulled these things from and the effect that it has emotionally on the characters and the audience. But one of my favorite passages that I found was written by Adrian Paul Kingwell, and he goes through the musical breaking down the dramaturgical background, as I mentioned, and he states it brilliantly. So he says, the use of the waltz indicates the impermanence of time within the show and the emotional distance between characters. Reworked motifs from the opening number are used to signify character emotion. Harmonic language conveys emotional state. And finally, character traits and qualities are shown to be represented by musical stylistic traits. In other words, if you don't believe me that this show is above and beyond the norm, trust our handy master students to guide you to the light. I promise you will not be disappointed. I consider this a show for anyone, even if you are not a classical musical person, because it is so contemporary. I always want to think of this as like how do I describe it? An indie musical, for instance, where it may not be as popular, but when you find people who enjoy it, they're hooked on it. Unfortunately, a lot of people discovered this musical because of the movie that came out in 2015, and this starred Anna Kendrick and Jeremy Jordan. They had a $2 million budget, which is pretty minimal for a film. They brought back in barely any money at all because of it went almost straight to video or Netflix, really. It might even still be on Netflix. I waited for a long time to watch this because I am so attached to the musical and I feel so deeply for the character of Kathy, especially. I think a lot of actresses do. This fear of failure, this feeling that other people are surpassing you. But it's not just actresses. I think a lot of us feel that way in our career. She does this piece called Climbing Uphill, which talks about her struggles going to auditions every day. And I find that most people can connect to this just as feeling like an imposter in your own skin. You know, she's standing there with all of these different actresses lined up to go into this audition, and she's describing the experience. And yes, of course, as an auditioning actress, that you connect really quickly, but even just as someone in their career who feels stuck or stagnant and feels that they continue to push the same buttons and continue to push themselves and do all the right things, and there's still a line of other people and other candidates who are going to be better. It's so relatable. And I keep saying that word, but I think it's important, especially in the musical theater canon, because so many musical theater characters are out of the norm, whether they're super extra and you have crazy flamboyancy, or you have female characters who are bawdy. What makes this show special is you don't really like or dislike these characters because they're human. You know, you want to blame Jamie for breaking up the marriage, but then you look at Kathy and how unsupportive she was and how selfish she was at times. It really is a beautiful way to convey a modern breakup to me, because it wasn't out of hatred that he strayed from the path of monogamy. You know, it was him feeling that no matter what he did, he couldn't help Kathy see what she was worth. And he was tired of dragging her through their life together. He felt weighed down. And then you have Kathy, who I connect with so much, especially the line Jamie says about her, "If I didn't believe in you and all of the 10,000 women you are." I mean, what woman doesn't feel that way? We all feel discombobulated at times. I may be a little bit more extra in that field. I think a lot of artists are. But what I'm trying to get at, and the reason I'm prefacing this as when we dive into the film, is I didn't feel that Anna Kendrick could display the amount of emotional complexity and distress needed by that character. I actually loved the opening scene when she does Still Hurting. It was very simplistic. It was a situation I could really identify with, because she's sitting there alone in the house that they shared together, watching the sun just unconnected and kind of in this haze, looking at what their life had become. And of course, she's blaming things on Jamie and saying this was Jamie's fault and Jamie made this decision. You know, as I mentioned before, we're physically seeing this in the stage production, because while they're on stage together most of the time, they never actually interact, except for during the next 10 minutes when at the end of that number they say their vows, which is a beautiful moment. And it's a great way to show that, like, yes, they both went into this with the same intentions. However, life changes. And this is a great example of how when we don't grow together, when you're with someone you can't grow with, either you recognize that and you move on and you get out, or you continue to push it and then things can start to fall apart. So that is a huge thing I felt was missing from the film, even though they touched on this idea that they're not really together, because, for instance, Jamie would be singing, Jeremy Jordan as Jamie would be singing to Anna Kendrick as Kathy, and she's not really responding. She's sort of just there as a figure that he's talking to. But again, she's not like really in the moment, and vice versa. But I just don't, this is such an instance of stage magic to me, how poignant it can be when you see it on stage, that when you put it in the film and they're physically side by side and you're seeing them driving through upstate New York, or, you know, they're going on all these adventures throughout the city together, it just took away that feeling and that visual of this isn't going to work. And especially when it comes to A Miracle Would Happen, which is Jamie essentially just telling everybody, or telling the audience, that, you know, he wishes that once he had gotten married, all other women kind of just disappeared, because he has now started to become successful and famous, and now women are, you know, falling at his feet, and he is now married. And in the story, they do get married very young. He starts to hit his success and his stride at 24. But Jeremy Jordan's character, to me, in that scene really came across more sleazy than the show. And I didn't like that, because you're really demonizing one of the characters, when in reality, you kind of flip back and forth between, oh, okay, so that's what she did. Oh, okay, that's where he messed up. It took away some of the humanity for me, and it really kind of camped it up. So it took out that gritty feeling. Now, I know that this film was well received. I mean, I am kind of a theater purist. There are so many movie musicals that I love, and I've talked about them on the pod before. Jesus Christ Superstar is a great example. Godspell is a great example. But to me, these were films that really captured the true essence that the playwright or the composer was attempting to get across. And when you throw in this young love, it just had a completely different feeling to it. And it wasn't a bad movie. It just wasn't the last 5 years to me. I like Anna Kendrick. Her vocal range is a bit higher than Sherry Renee Scott, which is fine. But it takes away part of that maturity and part of that grittiness that Scott gave to that role, which is, I mean, to me, she is and will always be Kathy. I like Jeremy Jordan. I put the on there because I definitely feel that there are other male actors that are a bit better. He's very pretty to look at. He did wonderfully in Newsies. If you watch the Broadway recording of Newsies, he's in that as Jack Kelly, and he's wonderful in that. His accent could use with a little work. But he really is a talented actor. Again, he felt too polished. Jamie is a neurotic writer. I mean, there's a whole song about how he's pacing around eating bags of Doritos, trying to write the next page in his book, and Kathy's watching this turmoil he's going through. I don't see somebody like Jeremy Jordan's Jamie being that person. It just seemed very disconnected to me. So Yes, it's enjoyable if you don't have any other outlet to see the show. I suppose you could enjoy it, but just watch it knowing that there is a grittiness and an honesty to the show when it is on stage that the film didn't hit. And I would love if somebody is out there to argue with me. I am all about it. Please comment. Let me know if I am totally off base here. But it's my podcast and no one's here to argue with me. So, as I said at the end of the Evil Dead episode, good, bad, I'm the girl with the pod. Fight me. So anyways, that's my spiel on the film. Obviously, this is a musical I'm very passionate about. It's always been in my top 5, unironically, favorite musicals. And it just has always carried so much weight with me. And I think that's because of Brown's ability to be so honest and real about what it means to be human. Say what you want about him as, a composer and as a person, or I shouldn't say as a composer, as a person, he has been noted to be a little bit, a little full of himself and things like that. I don't tend to care about those things when the product is as amazing as his is. But I really hope that if you're listening this pod, if you haven't listened to the last 5 years before, or maybe it's been a long time, pick up Spotify. It's on there. Start at the beginning. Don't hit shuffle and let the story come alive for you again. And if this is the first time for you, I would love to know your thoughts on, did this hit home for you? Was it too unrelatable because, you're not in the arts, or did it still hit home even though you don't connect to the characters and what they're doing, even if it's as far as their relationship, or, Kathy comes from a small town and her feeling of, I never want to go back to being a small town girl. I want to make something of myself. I find that all of that is really well communicated throughout the musical, and I would love to know if you feel that way as well. So please let me know. But I so appreciate you guys joining me for this little adventure. I am amazed that I have subscribers. I am so thankful that you stick around and listen to these things. This is my artistic outlet, and I really enjoy sharing these things with you. Special shout out to Brent Johnson, who sent me a text full of things he wants to hear about. That was really exciting. Please keep sending me fan requests. I shouldn't say fan requests, I guess. Subscriber requests. I mean, you could be a fan if you want to. And I would love to tell you more about these things and open up the world of theater. Keep in mind, I'm not just here to talk about musicals. If there's something about dance or plays that you're interested in, I'm definitely looking to do more in plays. Musicals is just kind of my bread and butter. If there's things you really, really want to know about, I am here to do the research for you. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share my voice and my thoughts with all of you. I hope you guys tune in next week. I'm on a roll of getting these things out on time. Heck yes, 2 weeks in a row. And I look forward to hearing from you. Please hit subscribe, share, like, whatever you would like to do. It's just me. It's just me. I am on Spotify. I am on iTunes, YouTube, the Apple Podcast little icon guy, which is the same thing as iTunes, whatever. And isn't there one more that I'm on there? YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. No, that sounds about right. Yeah, check us out. Please share, spread the word. If there's an episode you really enjoy, let me know. I'm definitely still trying to find my feet with this, so I appreciate your feedback. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I look forward to chatting with you later.
That was a mess.